Hi, this is Mark or MarqueeCrew, and I'm here to go and explain to you the user interfaces that are part of the contains enlist macro. In the macro itself, we need to configure all of the questions that are part of the user interface. And we will do that in two steps here. What we'll do is we'll identify each of the fields that are going to take action in the macro, and then follow that up with how do we make it look the way that this macro does with instructions and little bits of help, even adding in a copyright if you wanted to, just those things to make it more production ready. So in my macro, I've got my user interface separate from the process itself. And those processes that are below are connected to the user interface. But what I've done is I've used uh, wireless connections to be able to demonstrate how the data comes together, but without complicating the process itself. I find it difficult to be able to look at lines going across and up and down. So I take all the user interface connections, which bring me from the configuration into the process. I also use containers. So I've got all my user interfaces tools inside of a container that I can readily minimize and be able to see the process without the complication of the interface. So what I've got is a drop-down list or a text box or checkbox, any of the controls here that are in the interface panel. I bring one of those onto the canvas, and this is my target terms, and I give that text that I want to be displayed in the macro here. I can also put in default text as well. I've got a search field. The search field is somewhat special because when I'm searching the data, I don't know the names of the fields that are going to come into the macro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to the macro input to the question anchor here at the bottom. I'm going to bring that into the uh, the macro interface tool for the drop down, and I've selected for configuration fields for macro input. I also changed the name of this to being search field, and I've eliminated those field types that I'm not interested in searching. I only wanted to search the string and bstring types of fields. So what will appear in the drop-down is a list of those fields which I think are searchable. The next is the delimiter. I'm going to again use a text box, and I'm going to put in default text here of a comma. I've got a checkbox here for case insensitive. If I wanted to make that the default value, I would click this checkbox. Otherwise, I can leave it unchecked. Do you want to filter the output? And I have this as special configuration, collapse group when deselected. The reason why I do that is I'm not going to show you the questions that follow about do you want the trues or the falses if you didn't want to filter the output. The next question that I have are find these results. And in that, I've manually set name colon value pairs, one per line. So for an English easy to read, I have records matched to terms true, and then colon, and the result value that I'm going to be using to set into the filter is either a 1 or a 0. So If I were only looking at that, then those questions would be asked to the user, but they would take no effect whatsoever in the process below. That's what an action tool is for. So we'll take a look at the first user interface tool that I've got. So what is the target terms that you're looking for? And I've got an action on that, that whatever you answered for that is going to update a value. It's going to come into column 1, all these X's. We're just going to replace it with the search terms that you asked for. And that will actually go into the first row of data, into that first column, find me, and it will essentially, before the macro runs, do a find and replace on that set of X's, and will just now make it whatever it was that the user input. Now, I know I need to have a string here. So what I've done is I've put an error message here. And I said, if the length of the input from this target term equals 0, that my target terms are missing. And so I'm going to show an error message in the macro so that if we're looking at the macro and if I were to eliminate those target terms, a red exclamation will appear, and then that error message, target terms defined, are missing. If I do have target terms defined, then it works fine. Now, this is something which is a finishing touch, but I'm going to go through that with you because I think it's important for you to think through, what do I do if, say, you're asking for an input from the user and they fail to give you an input, or you're looking for, say, what day of the week and they should not put in a valid day. The next field was search field, and I already went through with you and explained how that's going to then select a field out of your data. Now we're going to update. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that search field and update the find and replace. And it's going to update the value. There are some other choices that could be used. And I'm going to update X field. And I'm going to get rid of X field and replace it with example description. The next is delimiter. So we're looking for a single delimiter. And so I do have an error message. The error message is going to look for that length does not equal 1. If it's 0, 2, or any other number, then 1. It's going to present a message delimiter is not present or is not a single character. It's going to then have an action which comes to that text to columns field, the text to column tool, and it's going to update the comma here. So the way that this action looks is it's going to update value. It's going to look at the value for the delimiter of a comma, and it's going to replace it. Case insensitive is a checkbox, and that's going to have an action as well, and it's connected also to the find and replace. This time, it's going to go and replace the no case value of false. And I used the formula this time for that. And I said if contains the answer true, then it's going to be a 1, otherwise it's a 0. Do I want to filter the output? And that answer is going to update this detour. And there's an action type update detour direction from question. That's a very easy configuration. If there's a check here, this is checked. If there's no check here, then this is unchecked and you go through the nominal path. So now, if I have come through the filter output, then I want to find these results. Do I want the true or the false? I've got an update to the formula. And in that formula, found indicator equals 1. Now I'm replacing a specific string, 1. I'm going to either replace it with the number 1 or the number 0. At that point, it's ready for output. I've called this output anchor O. I've called this one output anchor I. And when I take a look at the macro, I can see an O here, and I can see an I here. Our next video will explain how to configure the interface so that all of those appear in the order that you're looking for.